Hey everybody, and welcome to Let's Look at Strider. Strider is the new game from Double Helix and Capcom. Double Helix you may know from the Killer Instinct reboot that just happened, but it's a reboot of the Strider franchise, which I believe originally started on the Sega CD, although I must admit that out of all the classic like 2D side-scrolling action franchises, Strider is one of the ones I am least familiar with, having never owned a Sega CD. If it actually came out for Saturn or something like that, I apologize and throw myself on the mercy of, hopefully, your understanding and tolerance. We're gonna get started here. Unfortunately, I really like this game so far, actually. I think it's pretty good, but no multiple save files means that I am gonna have to completely give up my progress so far in order to start a new game, and we'll start on normal, which is fine. It's a pretty quick-moving game. I've heard that it's only about 5 hours long, and on my other save file I have about 2 hours in so far, so it's not the end of the world, but it is a little frustrating. Multiple save files, man. Just put them in there if you can. I would much appreciate it as someone who does videos like this all the time. It's one of the major reasons I don't actually end up finishing a lot of these games when I have to restart from the beginning. Mostly because I don't want to spoil things, you know, past the halfway point, potentially in the game. So let's explain what is going on in Strider, and if you're familiar with the base franchise, then I apologize, because this is going to be a video which is basically just going to tackle it from the perspective of somebody who's pretty fresh-faced with respect to Strider itself. I'm using the Xbox 360 controller. I should mention this is available on Steam for 15 bucks and is also available on PS4 and Xbox One, I believe. By using the analog stick, we move around. The movement actually feels really, really smooth and solid. By using the X button, we can do some attacking here. We can attack in multiple directions. We don't have a shield, but later on in the game we will get an ability that allows us to actually deflect bullets with our katana, which basically allows us to smack enemies in the bullet and then send the bullet back at them for having the audacity to step to us in the first place. And we'll get a host of abilities that will allow us to progress in the game. I've heard this described as a Metroidvania, and it is Metroidvania-y, but by the way, Metroidvania E, that's with like a dash and a Y. There is not like a Metroidvania A, B, C, D, E that maybe you missed out on. But it's more linear than that, but there are some Metroidvania-type elements that happen in the game. Like, you get various different powers and abilities that allow you to access areas that were otherwise inaccessible, and you might be saying, well, that's like the definition of a Metroidvania, and you're not wrong, but where it differs is that you don't really seem to do very much backtracking in order to get to those areas. Like, the game moves forward at a pretty consistent pace, and it moves really, really quickly, which is one of the things I like the most about it. Let's just kill this thing. Yeah, it moves really quickly, which is one of the things I like the most about it. But you don't really have like a hub world that you go back to and like you're like, oh, there's something here, but I don't have the ability to get by it. Let's go play for like another hour, find that ability, and come back later. Instead, it's like you find an obstacle you can't get through, and then 2 seconds later you get the ability. Which I like, actually, because it keeps things moving, but also it's Metroidvania-y, but on a more maybe superficial level. So we've already gotten our first power up here. This is a slide attack, which allows us to go through those grates, as you can see right there, and this will open up a little bit more of the level to us. And one thing I was going to talk about right off the bat here is I really, really like how this game seems to have respect for the player's time. So there's been a lot of games that I've played so far over the first, 6th of 2014 that I think are guilty a little bit of padding their length out just to make players feel a little bit better about the purchasing price. The Banner Saga kind of chief amongst them in my mind right now, and I'm not shitting on the Banner Saga. I actually really like that game. It might be my favorite game that I've played so far this year, including Strider, but things did tend to plot a little bit, so I'm using it as an example to kind of express that. But Strider seems to be exactly the opposite, Over the course of this 10 or 15 minute long video, we are probably, well, not 10 or 15 minutes, like 15 to 20 minute long video, we are probably going to get several upgrades. We're probably going to have at least 1 or maybe 2 or 3 boss fights. And beyond that, we'll see a lot of the stuff that the game has to offer very, very quickly. So it's not like it's spaced out and you're constantly going through the same environments over and over and over to get these power-ups. They come really fast and furious, which is something I appreciate because it feels like the game has a lot of respect for players' time. Another thing that I really like is all the powers, at least that I've gotten so far, have seemed meaningful. Like the slide, obviously, it has, it's a means to an end to get into certain areas because it allows us to slide through grates to access areas that would otherwise be inaccessible to us, right? But in addition to that, that should be more health, not that we necessarily need it right now. In addition to that, it also serves a purpose in combat, and that seems to be the norm when it comes to, like, all of the upgrades that you get in the game. So the slide, not only does it allow us to slide through grates, which we'll be able to see pretty conveniently on our map here, but it also allows us to kind of like slide through enemies, and that allows us to avoid attacks, but also, kind of cross them up a little bit, cross up the enemies a little bit, and get behind them when maybe they're a little bit more vulnerable over there. We can also use our power-ups to get special abilities. That seems to, or not special abilities, sorry, but unlockables. And that seems to be where, like, the majority of the kind of Metroidvania-type elements in here come in. They seem to be like, you know, you can use your special powers and backtrack a little bit and get things like concept art or unlock bonus levels and stuff like that. And one thing I actually meant to mention, we're about to enter kind of like a second mini-boss fight here, or actually this will be our first mini-boss fight. I have confused myself already, but this will be to get another upgrade, our second upgrade. But one thing I did want to mention is that the way that I kind of feel about this game is that it's almost like a more action-y Mark of the Ninja. Like, if Mark of the Ninja is like a 2D Thief or a 2D side-scrolling like Splinter Cell or something like that, we should use our slide to get around this guy's attacks whenever possible. And then it should be relatively easy. And I'll talk about the difficulty of the game so far, because that's something that's been either a sore spot for a couple of reasons for some reviewers so far that I've seen. But anyway, yeah, if Mark of the Ninja is like a 2D side-scrolling Thief, this is like a 2D side-scrolling, don't die. A 2D side-scrolling Devil May Cry or something like that, if that makes sense. Now, if I just focus and don't button mash, I should be able to succeed here relatively easily. The difficulty of the game has been pretty easy so far. And like I think I mentioned off the top of this, I played about 2.5 hours of this so far, so it's not like I am, you know, brand new in the game. I'm at roughly the halfway point, and I fought some bosses that beguiled me for a little bit, but after just paying attention to their patterns and not button mashing, I found it fairly easy on normal difficulty to succeed so far. So inevitably, some people are going to be disappointed by the fact that this is not super difficult, but, you know, on the hard mode, it might be substantially more difficult than it is on normal. I mean, at least that's the general idea, isn't it? So we got another ability there for beating that boss, and that was the ability to do a charge attack. And again, we can use this to open these kind of locked doors by overloading those power circuits prior to them, but we can also use this to destroy... Oh, we got kind of like a similar fight against that boss that we just fought. It does like the very... almost Capcom-y type thing, like classic retro game at least type thing, of making you fight bosses as regular enemies a little bit later on in the experience, which is, I think, a really good way of handling progression. I like it a lot, at least, but we obviously tore through them very, very quickly because our charge shot is really good. Lots of health scattered around as well. So, these are basically checkpoints that allow us to heal as well. Now we'll move on just a little bit further here, and we'll destroy these power couplers. This is kind of like a superficial puzzle element, and this one is very, very superficial, but we will have some, like, a little bit wider geographical kind of, like, switch puzzles and stuff like that, where you have to move around and, you know, maybe explore different rooms and use multiple different powers here. But we are actually about to have, like, a second kind of set piece here. I don't know if I'd necessarily call this a boss fight, but you could probably fairly accurately describe it as a boss fight. And by now, you should be getting kind of a feel for what I meant when I said that the game moves extremely quickly. We've already had, you know, one boss fight, gotten 2 upgrades, and we're about to have a huge boss fight on a mechanical dragon, like 35,000 feet above the cities of Kazakhstan here. And there's some platforming puzzles that happen in the game as well. I'm not sure if this was an element in the earlier Strider titles. I'm assuming it was, but yeah, we use kind of like our climbing axe here to climb as quickly as possible. And this allows us to do some cool things like being, you know, hanging from the ceiling, essentially. This is one of the reasons, you know, in kind of its freedom of movement, it feels a lot like a more action-based Mark of the Ninja. I'm not saying this is better or worse than Mark of the Ninja. I like Mark of the Ninja a great deal. It was one of my favorite games of 2012. Oh, barely managed to get out of the way there. This is kind of like a puzzly boss fight here. I got hit, but that's not that big of a deal. We'll just destroy one of these kind of test tubes on top of this dragon, and then we'll enter the second phase of the fight. And most of the boss fights are a little bit more kind of like Castlevania-y, but this one is a little bit more of kind of like a puzzly boss fight, which is a little unusual, but that's okay. So we are just gonna have to take care of these enemies. These enemies are actually just like disguised ways of giving us more health in case we took a lot of damage. And then we'll enter the second phase here, where we'll probably have to deal with bullets and the missiles perhaps as well. Oh, those electrical beams, that's what we have to deal with. I really wish, and I've been having a good time with the game so far, and it's a weird thing to talk about this before I've even finished with the game once. But I really hope there is a New Game Plus where you get to keep your abilities, because the game seems like it's kind of designed to be still playable even after you have all of the abilities that you get in the game. You could still just kind of like speed run through the game, and it wouldn't be like a lot of Metroidvanias where once you have that like last ability, you could just punch open the door to the boss room, or you know, like do the crouch roll into the boss room or something like that, and all of a sudden it would be automatic and far too easy. Instead, oh my god, I am getting destroyed here. I think we just have to dodge these ones. Instead, I think, you know, because the game is still pretty linear, you would still have to do the majority of the game. It would just be faster. And I'm not sure if the game is actually built for speedrunning, but it does at least so far feel like it could be built for speedrunning, if you know what I mean. Obviously, it's built not specifically for speedrunning in all likelihood, but, you know, with speedrunning being a definite possibility. It seems like a game that would be really fun to speedrun is what I'm trying to get at. So I should stop being bad. We're just going to cartwheel on top of this dragon, and by destroying that should kill this guy, thereby allowing us to land in the next area of the game. And we're going to keep playing for a little bit longer here, because the longer we play, the more abilities you're going to see. I do have some gripes that I would offer about the game. You know, I should say, even though I've been fairly glowing so far, this is not my favorite game of 2014 so far. I think it's pretty good, and I think people who are into games like this and who are totally okay with having a game that maybe you could beat in one afternoon or 2 afternoons, if you play it fairly prodigiously during those days, are going to be, like, maybe not in love, but they're going to like it a great deal. But, you know, there are some gripes that you can offer about the game. A lot of the environments, and we haven't seen it so far because, again, it moves very quickly, especially at the start, but a lot of the environments, as we kind of get deeper and deeper into the city here, are pretty samey, and you find yourself in a lot of areas that just look basically the same. Like, you go to the sewers, and the sewers are, you know, dark and gray, and then you go to the prison, and the prison's dark and gray. And to the game's credit, there are some cool elements that happen in those areas that make them somewhat unique and give them their own personal flavor. Like in the prisons, for example, I think it was in the prisons, or in like the medical lab. There's like a gauntlet that you have to go through where they just keep summoning like more and more enemies, and then you beat a round of difficult enemies, and then you have to beat a jumping puzzle or like a platforming puzzle. So the game strikes a pretty good balance between like platforming puzzles and combat, by the way. Probably like 2/3 combat, 1/3 puzzles that involve platforming, I would say. We're about to get another power up here, and I know that for sure because we have come across a lot of gates that kind of look like the mute button on the Xbox 360 interface that unfortunately I can't really do anything with right now. So I am going to come over here, and we don't go through there. Maybe we go up through the ceiling. The game is very, very good as well. If you look at that beacon on our mini-map up in the top right, the game is very good about telling us where to go, which is pretty important in a game like this where, again, a lot of the environments feel pretty samey. So it's really nice that the game is like, okay, yes, a lot of it is kind of like gray Soviet architecture, but we'll figure out a way to kind of like meaningfully convey where you're supposed to go at any given moment. So I think we have another boss fight here. And again, I have to stress that the game is pretty prodigious in the way that it introduces you to enemies and then uses those, or introduces you to enemies via bosses and then uses those bosses as just like vanilla enemies later. So this enemy is basically pretty similar to something like the Yellow Devil that you fight in like Mega Man 1. Is it Mega Man, or am I thinking of Mega Man X, that enemy that you fight on Sting Chameleon stage? I think that's exactly what I'm thinking of. Not really Yellow Demon at all. Yellow Demon's a real dick about everything in the way that he phases across the map. This should be the end of this fight. Yeah, easy enough. So by going through this room, oh no, by going over here, we should get another power-up. Again, things move super, super quickly. This one should be, yeah, it's a downward strike, and this downward strike allows us to break through things like sewer grates here and access other areas of the game. The environments in design actually are pretty impressive, in spite of the fact that they do find, or I do find them a little bit samey as you move further and further into the game. But the way that the levels kind of develop or blossom, if you will, is really cool. Like, we'll eventually get this upgrade that will give us the ability to kind of like not necessarily warp, but like phase in between different dimensions of the map. Like, we can move from the foreground into the background and then continue moving like that. And, you know, it's not something that you really have a lot of creativity in using. The game mostly says, like, hey, use this ability here. And I kind of appreciate that. Otherwise, I would probably find myself getting lost. But it's still cool nonetheless, the way that the levels are designed, I think. I just wish that they were a little bit more visually interesting. Although there is some, you know, diversity that does happen. There's not a whole ton of it. But I do appreciate as well that in a lot of Metroidvanias, and I love Metroidvanias, it's one of my favorite, I guess you would call it a subgenre. In a lot of Metroidvanias, I spend a decent amount of my time getting lost and not knowing where to go. And that might just be me having a poor sense of direction. But even when I played something like, you know, Zelda: A Link Between Worlds or something like that, the vast majority of my time was not spent in dungeons. It was spent looking for entrances to dungeons, basically. Whereas in a game like this, that's substantially more kind of linear and good about telling you where you're supposed to go, that doesn't really happen as much. Which I appreciate. Not to say that this is a better game than A Link Between Worlds by any stretch of the imagination. It's just a different kind of experience, and I appreciate it for what it is. And again, I can't stress enough that my favorite things about the Strider reboot so far are the fact that it moves super, super quickly, and movement is just really, really fluid and fun. Like, just moving from place to place is very, very satisfying. And sometimes the platforming controls I find a little bit clunky. That's the other gripe that I would mention. And, you know, I find myself occasionally, like, getting stuck to walls, mostly because the buttons that I think are going to work don't actually really work as a result of kind of, like, the mechanics of the axe, but it's okay. For the most part, I still am having a very good time regardless. So we killed that enemy, and maybe we have, like, one more boss fight or something that we can come across here. You can see, at the very least, the environments are pretty sprawling. I apologize, I think the frame rate's looking a little bit wonky on XSplit right now, by the way, but it's, it runs completely smoothly when you are actually playing it for yourself. So that is just my computer occasionally showing its age and reminding me again that I need to get some upgrades done probably as quickly as possible to make sure that that's okay. But anyway, let's come up here, and we may have one more boss fight. Another thing that the game is very good at is kind of the characters that it introduces, and I don't want to say that the game necessarily has a great story. This is a little bit of a platforming puzzle here, by the way, but a very simple one. I don't want to say that the game has a great story, not because it's necessarily a huge lie, but more so because the story is not really a major focus. For every, like, 45 minutes that you play, you might get one bit of dialogue. And, you know, stories can be told in ways that are not simply dialogue heavy, but Strider is not a game that necessarily does that. Also, occasionally the checkpoints on these things, or not checkpoints, but if you, like, fail a platforming puzzle, it can take you a long time to get back into a position where you can actually attempt that puzzle again. But let's give it a second here for this thing to come back. But yeah, the way that it kind of handles characters, and especially villains, I think is pretty good. Like, you're introduced to villains once, and then they recur many, many times, and they recur in stronger and stronger forms, which is something I'm a sucker about when it comes to games like this. I mean, think of something like a Balrog in Cave Story. You know, you meet him once and he's pretty easy, and then the next time you fight him he's a little bit more difficult, and then you fight him, you know, multiple times and he's more difficult in every single one of them. It's a very classic mechanic, and it's very, very satisfying as well, because you kind of get introduced to these characters. I'm gonna get killed here. You kind of get introduced to these characters over and over, and you know, you get a fondness or you build up a rivalry in your mind with them, and it leads to some kind of cool fights, I should say. And also, a lot of the enemies that you fight are just, like, cartoony, and I think that totally works in a game like this. So we really need to pick up some health as soon as possible. Hopefully we find that. This is a little bit more of a puzzle-heavy area. I will admit that I am not necessarily the greatest fan of the puzzles in Strider, but usually they're over pretty quickly. This one is just a little bit longer than average. I think by coming up here, we can open this door, and that will cause the subway car to get out of the way, which then allows us to go down to the next level. And we'll finish this video off by doing the boss fight that I believe happens down here, and it shouldn't be too difficult if I remember the patterns of the boss, which I think I do. And again, I have to stress that so far in the game, I have not found things exceptionally difficult, but I have seen some reviewers that have said that it's a very, very difficult game, or at least a game that has difficulty spikes. And I haven't experienced that for myself, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, you know? So we'll see, I guess, as we kind of move a little bit further. I guess I'll see off camera as I move a little bit further and further into the game. I will say I actually have, you know, mentioning earlier that, you know, these frame rate issues are probably as a result of recording. I have had occasional issues where the game does get a little bit framey when I am playing it, you know, off camera. And that's something that is worth bringing up because, you know, I'm not recording this on, like, a netbook or something like that. You know, this is a 6-core with a video card that has 3 gigabytes of internal memory. This is a beast of a machine for playing a game like this. It's just, for whatever reason, sometimes I get some performance hits. So keep that in mind. I think it'll still run, basically, as long as you have a computer that was made within the past few years. But you might encounter some performance hits as time goes on. So I do believe we will have a boss fight as we go down here, and we'll also have the ability to get another ability. I think I kind of dislike this ability, but we'll see in a second, because we're probably going to end the video here anyway. So this is Pee-Poo. I, you know, feel pretty good about saying that name. She is one of the wins, and we're going to fight these wins in multiple boss fights over the course of the game. So at first, like, she's part of basically a group of sorceresses who are sisters, I think. So we're gonna fight her first, and it's relatively easy, as you can see, although I did lose to her once or twice when I was just learning her patterns, which is basically essential for actually succeeding here. But then the next time we fight her, we'll be fighting her alongside one of her sisters. So we're gonna be fighting not only 2 enemies, but one of those enemies is going to be more difficult than this one. And then the next time we fight them, we fight 3 of the sisters at the same time, and it gets even more difficult. This one, as you can see, was pretty darn easy. But, you know, again, you might expect to die a couple of times there as if you're just playing for the very first time. So, we got a new ability called the Eagle Flight Perch. That's what it does if you want to use it as like an offensive ability, is it just summons like this eagle that can hit enemies that are further away from you. Or from a puzzle element, if you find perches like this, you can basically like Ezio yourself up to the very top, and we'll shoot out of the roof here. And I am actually going to, as soon as possible, just exit back to the main menu. There are some other things going on here in Strider, but I haven't really checked them out. I haven't checked out any of the bonus levels, or, you know, I don't care about the concept art or stuff like that. And I feel like I'm probably in the majority when it comes to that, but they do exist. But for me, the major focus is a single-player campaign. Heard it's 5 to 7 hours long, you know, maybe to be on the safe side, maybe like one good day of play, one good afternoon of play, if you're really, really into the game. And it's $15. I like it. I don't think it's the best game that I've played all year, but if you want to compare this to something that I covered recently, Oniken, I think this is better than Oniken. Not to shit on that game was good as well, but I'm more likely to finish playing this one. I think it's pretty good. I have no idea how faithful it is to the people that were really into the earlier iterations of the Strider franchise, but does some good things. It moves really quickly, has a lot of respect for players' time. Lots of stuff happens. Progression happens at a very quick rate. You can see that I'm using a lot of the same words here, but you know, the movement feels pretty joyous just in and of itself. Difficulty feels fairly well balanced, even though it might have looked a little bit easy in this video. It's because I've already done, you know, this opening section before, and it does have a hard mode, which would increase the difficulty if you're interested in playing on that and punishing yourself a little bit more. Overall, I think I can give this a fairly cemented thumbs up. I don't think this is going to be my favorite game of the year, but I like it, and I would recommend it if you're the kind of person that's into stuff like this. And even if you're not into stuff like this, but you were maybe into Mark of the Ninja, this is kind of like the other side of Mark of the Ninja. You know, if Mark of the Ninja was like the cookie part of the Oreo, this is the cream part of the Oreo. That's maybe a good way to put it. I'm not sure whether I prefer this to Mark of the Ninja, though. I think I still might prefer Mark of the Ninja a little bit. But in any case, that's neither here nor there. There will be a link in the video description below to pick up Strider if you are interested. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to show your support by leaving a like. It helps out a great deal. And of course, subscribe if you want to see more in the future. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.